The first story comes from Reddit user, The Vegetarian Vampire. I was home for Christmas break during my sophomore year of college. I lived in a big city, but I grew up in a small town about an hour away. I got back late on Christmas night, around 11 or midnight. I lived with two of my sisters and my dad in a house that my grandfather built. It's a pretty big house, 2 stories with a full basement and an attached garage, and it's surrounded by woods. There were only about 4 street lights that stretched from one end of the road to the other. There are no sidewalks, just blacktop and grass that runs along both sides of the road. It's a very nice neighborhood, and we've never had any problems before. I pulled into the driveway and parked in the garage. I turned off the engine and got out, then walked around front to open the door for my sisters. As soon as I stepped out of the garage, I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel. I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed it was a neighbor walking their dog or something, so I walked around the front of the car to get to the door. After I opened the door, I could hear what sounded like heavy footsteps running across the street and stopping in front of our house. Now I'm thinking, maybe it was some kids playing. Still nothing to worry about, but those footsteps sounded heavy, like whoever was making them was a big person. At this point, I can hear my sisters shuffling around inside, so I start yelling, "Hey, someone's out there." I was trying to be nonchalant about it. No response. I walk to the window and look out. So all I see are the trees. Then I start hearing what sounds like hail. I run back to the window and it hits me. It's not hail. It's that same heavy-handed pounding on the roof. Then I hear glass breaking. I don't know how loud I screamed, but my sister comes running down the stairs, asking what's wrong. I can barely get the words out because I'm so scared. I just keep saying, "Someone's out there. Someone's breaking the window." And my sister is standing there like, "What? Who?" I grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the window. I couldn't explain it. I just knew something was out there. She looked out the window and said, "Oh, it's just the wind. Don't be silly." I still remember the way she sounded. She was half asleep and annoyed that I was waking her up. She goes back upstairs, and I stand there, frozen with fear. A few seconds go by, and I hear more footsteps on the roof, closer this time. I don't want to look, but I do. There's a dark figure standing on top of my dad's car in the garage. I turn and run for the basement door, fumbled with the lock, finally got it open, and ran down the stairs. I don't remember if I locked the door behind me or not. My heart was pounding, so I'm standing there trying to catch my breath. I can hear heavy footsteps coming down the basement stairs. They're slow and deliberate, like whoever's making them is enjoying it. I backed away from the steps and turned off the lights. I was breathing heavily, and I could feel my eyes bulging out of my skull. Pulled myself together enough to get under the workbench. I stayed there for a good hour until I heard my dad come in and start yelling, "Who's down here?" He didn't find anything, but in the morning when the sun was shining through the window, I saw a trail of muddy footprints leading from the basement door to the front door. My dad called the police, and they found a rock that matched the size and shape of the rock that was used to break the window. The state police came too, but they didn't find any prints or anything else. Apparently, it was an open and shut case. The local police didn't even bother investigating. To this day, I have no idea who was out there that night. It's been 8 years, and I still get freaked out thinking about it. I rarely go home alone now, and when I do, I always check the windows, It's honestly one of the scariest things I've ever experienced, and I hope I never do again. The next story comes from Reddit user Miss Scarlett. I am a woman. My family moved to a new home when I was 7. It was an old Victorian-style home, beautiful, huge, with many rooms and creaky floorboards. The master bedroom was massive with a huge closet. So my parents' room was at the opposite end of the house from mine and my brother's. We shared a Jack and Jill bathroom, which also connected to a small office room. This room wasn't used for much except as a place to store extra toilet paper and towels. It was basically never entered. One evening, I was homesick from school and laying in bed watching TV. It was winter, so the windows were closed. Suddenly, I heard what sounded like screams in the middle of the night. Obviously, I was freaked out, sitting in bed wondering what it could be. Then I started hearing what sounded like footsteps near my room. I began to panic, unsure if I should call out to my mom or just hide under the covers and hope whatever it was went away. Eventually, the commotion outside my door stopped and I fell asleep. In the morning after, of course, not sleeping at all, I got out of bed to go use the bathroom. As I passed by the office room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. It was never left open, so I was immediately freaked out again. I quickly went to my mom's room and told her what I had heard and what I had seen. Mom, of course, was confused since she hadn't heard anything, and she checked on my brother to make sure he was okay. Since he was fine, she figured it must have been a dream. I was upset that she didn't believe me, but I let it go. After all, it was just a weird noise that I probably imagined. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and it happens again. I hear what sounds like screams in the middle of the night, followed by heavy footsteps near my bedroom. Once again, I woke up in a panic and ended up spending most of the day in my mom's room. At night, when I tried to go back to my room, I refused to go in alone. My mom walked with me to my room and asked if she could stay until I fell asleep. Of course, I agreed. She sat on the edge of my bed while I laid in the middle of it until eventually I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, of course, I told her about the noises again. This time, she listened and promised to investigate. Together, we went to the office room and she pushed the door open. It had jammed shut and there was a huge spider web in the doorway. Beyond the web, the room was empty except for the usual spare toilet paper and towels. We never saw a spider, but my mom ripped the web out of the door jamb anyway. And after that, the noises stopped. To this day, I wonder what it was. And finally, we have these creepy crawlies. When I was young, my mom would often find spiders crawling on my blankets in the middle of the night. I'd scream bloody murder because I'm scared of spiders. My mom would laugh and say, "See, I told you, there are no such things as monsters under your bed, only spiders." Then she would kill the spider and tuck me in. Well, one night I was home alone. My mom was working the night shift, was watching TV, and I felt something crawl over my blanket. I looked down and saw a gigantic hairy spider crawling up my arm. I literally screamed as loud as I could, "Mom, there's a monster under my bed." Then the spider dropped off my bed and disappeared under the blankets. I started shaking with fear. I was positive it was going to climb back up my body and inject its venom into me, and I would die a horrible death. Then I started hearing what sounded like footsteps under my bed. I don't want to sound dramatic, but it really sounded like fingernails dragging metal motels across the floor. I started crying. I didn't want to move. I didn't want to get out of bed, and I didn't want to turn the light on. I seriously considered calling my mom at work, but I didn't want to wake her up. I kept crying and begging for help. Then I started hearing what sounded like whispers under my bed. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they sounded guttural and inhuman. Finally, the footsteps and whispering stopped, and after a while, I gathered up all my courage and turned on the light. The spider was gone. I looked under the bed, and everything appeared normal. I still couldn't bring myself to get out of bed, though. I laid there, paralyzed with fear. Then I started hearing what sounded like scratching noises coming from under the bed again. I cried out and started screaming for help. My mom came rushing in, and thank God she did. I'll never forget the look on her face. She was pale as a ghost, and her eyes were wide with terror. The moment she saw under the bed, her face drained of color, and she started screaming, "Get out of bed right now. Get out of bed." I didn't need to be told twice. I jumped out of bed and ran into the hallway with my mom close behind me. She flipped on all the lights and we checked under the bed. There was nothing there. I insisted on sleeping in my mom's room that night, and she agreed without question. In the morning, my dad came in to take me to school, and my mom told him what happened. He didn't believe her though. and said it must have been a dream. So I guess it's just another classic case of parents not believing their kids. But the story doesn't end there. For months afterward, I would wake up to what sounded like footsteps in my room and scratching noises coming from under my bed. Sometimes I would even wake up with the feeling of something crawling over me. But when I turned on the light, there was nothing there. Then, one night, my dad was sleeping over. I heard what sounded like footsteps in my room, and I ran into his room screaming. He was understandably freaked out and insisted on checking under the bed. Of course, there was nothing there. But while he was looking, I heard a small voice say, "Up here." Startled, my dad looked up to see a little girl standing in the corner of the room, smiling at him. I was crying and told him I didn't see anyone. So he just assumed I was having a nightmare and tried to comfort me. From that day on, he slept in my room every night to protect me until we could find a way to get rid of the monster. Well, one day my mom went online and found a way to contact a paranormal investigator named Ghost Dave. Supposedly, he was the best in the business. Anyway, Ghost Dave came to our house and performed a number of tests. He even managed to capture what sounded like footsteps on audio. He told us he believed the house was haunted and that there was a little girl who had died in the house many years ago. Apparently, she liked to play with the new toys in the house, and sometimes she would take things a little too far. He suggested we leave out some toys for her to play with, and maybe she would be less destructive. So we got her some dolls and stuffed animals and things like that, and overnight, the footsteps stopped. And after a while, the scratching stopped too. But every once in a while, we still hear footsteps in my room. And sometimes I wake up with the feeling of something crawling on me. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you want to hear more stories like these, then check out the playlist where I read the scariest stories from Reddit. Also, thanks to my supporters for supporting this channel.